Hello and welcome to World Bank Live. I'm Paul Blake. Today we're continuing our effort to understand how COVID-19 is impacting just about every aspect of global development, as well as the solutions that the international community is putting forward. And we're doing that today by looking at how digital development is playing a key role in the global response. From communications to remote working technologies, from digital healthcare infrastructure to distance learning, these are just a few of the ways that digital development is underpinning the response to this unprecedented crisis. And as the world starts to plan a recovery, access to digital services will be critical. That is the thought that World Bank Group President David Malpass shared on this program just last month.
One of the problems that poor countries have is just being cut off, that people live in rural areas, they don't have broadband, they in some cases, many cases, don't have electricity or water that's clean enough to drink. And so as we look to the other side of this, I think there's a way to make progress on advancing the digital services that people have available so they can get access to information. That's a starting point for farmers to do a better job, for people to learn skills. One of the big things that people can do now, and the bank has big programs in, is the skills learning at the basic level so that people are able to have jobs in the future. So that's something that we have. We're making available programs that will help people get access to education or to skills that will help them when there's a recovery.
Now, while many have reaped the benefits of an advanced digital landscape, which is blunting some of the worst effects that could have been part of an even worse pandemic experience for them, others are being left behind, lacking or having diminished access to technology that saves lives, sustains education, and promotes business continuity. Well, to learn more about the digital divide and what it means for countries as they respond to and prepare to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, and what can be done to support digital inclusion, I'm very happy to be joined this morning by the World Bank's Director for Digital Development, Buthina Guermazi. Buthina, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to World Bank Live.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Of course. Now, when I think about the ways that digital technology is playing a role in the pandemic response so far, I listed some of them there in the introduction. There are some obvious ways that come to mind, like video conferencing software that has allowed a lot of businesses and schools to continue operating. But I bet there are, a lot of other ways that connectivity has just been critical in responding to the crisis. So just to kick things off here, can you give me a sense of the scope in which technology is playing in this response?
Thanks, Paul. In fact, we can look at the many things that this call was called since the start of the pandemic. So it was called the sector that came to the rescue. It was called the hidden hero. It was called the sector that allowed economies to have a lifeline at a time where business as usual is so unusual. So with the social distancing, with the fact that, people had to be in a lockdown to contain the pandemic, the only way for business continuity was for people to hook on and to be part of this virtual world where if you're connected, if you have a good broadband connectivity, if you have the hardware and software, then there was a possibility for many people to cope with this new normal. So the examples are many, and they cover remote work, and we've seen many of us who had the luxury of having connection were able to continue their job in a virtual world. And we know just in the US, for example, that 50% of workers have moved to online work. We see it in schooling. Schooling is a very important element. We know that 1.5 billion school kids are out of school. school. And then the online learning, the edutech were, a response that many countries, have to use to make sure that, kids go to school. And the health sector, of course, the health sector is really a sector where, connectivity has been very important, and digital solutions have been very important to contain the pandemic, to treat it in many cases. So we have examples from telemedicine. We have examples of countries that were able to use application to self-test, and the whole use of data and, big data and artificial intelligence to help governments know, how to trace the pandemic and how to contain it. Of course, all of this has to happen within, due respect for privacy and due respect for, the personal data that is there. There are many other examples. So, for example, the issues about how do we help citizens that need help through mobile payment, through the social plans for paying through mobile, and we've seen in many countries the unprecedented growth of social protection support given through digital tools. So the examples are many, and I think as we look at it, what this crisis really showed that the countries are taking advantage in a way of transformation and digital transformation. And we've seen examples where, people who were reluctant to use technology because, they don't know how to use it, or, they don't trust it, were able to use it in case they have the connection and in case they have the connectivity.
What I'm hearing from you here is just how digital technology is really underpinning, whether it's research, whether it's the healthcare front lines, whether it's business, whether it's education, it's really underpinning the response here. And one thing that's been on my mind is, this response, or this crisis, is being compared in many corners to the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. Using that as a reference point, none of those technologies were available back then, or a lot of the technologies we're talking about today were not available back then. And as large swaths of the world have gone into lockdown over the past few months, I'd imagine there has been a surge in demand and stress on the infrastructure of the internet, the networks that are coming into people's homes. Could you talk a little bit about that in you and your team's research and the conversations that you have with government and industry? What are you hearing about how providers, be they the internet companies or other, how are they coping with that extra demand?
Yes, so definitely the demand has happened at multiple levels. So on voice, we know that the demand for traffic tripled, and we do know that many countries today,
like telephone calls.
Yes, but many countries today are still voice dominated. We had a very nice discussion with a number of countries connected. We had the Minister of Afghanistan that really showed that, the voice pressure in countries that are still voice dominated has been a challenge. So that's one dimension. Of course, data is very important. And what we've seen in data is like, on average, 20% surge of traffic linked to data. And in many countries, it has doubled. The other thing that requires, a surge of increased attention needed is cloud and cloud computing, video conferences, streaming. So in the different phases of, the digital space, there was a clear need that, the operators needed to create more space to accommodate the surge of traffic, whether voice or data or video. And what we've seen clearly an incredible response from both governments and from the private sector to respond very quickly to the situation. And I can give you examples.
Boost the capacity there. So whether it's voice or data or cloud, to really boost that capacity so that the infrastructure didn't become overloaded. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to take a quick moment. We just want to take a quick break, Bethina, to catch our breath and welcome everyone who is joining us here on World Bank Live. Today, we're looking at digital development and the role that it's playing in the coronavirus response, as well as how the digital divide between those who are readily able to access internet technologies and those who do not have that ability, how it's aggravating some of the worst effects of the pandemic. We've got people tuning in from around the world: Tanmay from Mumbai, Fabiola from Brazil, Rami in Stockholm, Siraj in Nepal, Dora in Dubai, tons more people around the world. Thank you so much for joining us. We have Buthina Guermazi on the line. She's the World Bank's Director for Digital Development. And I just want to bring Buthina back into the conversation here. And Buthina, like I said, sorry to interrupt you there, but before the break, we were talking about the increased demand that the internet service providers, the companies that we pay to connect our homes to the internet, that the increased demand that they're experiencing. A lot of places are seeing that increased demand, as you said, and there's been a fast-tracked response to help meet some of that demand. Can we talk a little bit about the digital divide between countries and places where people have ready access to internet and where they don't? Help me, and those watching understand this a bit more. Geographically speaking, where are we talking about? What countries and regions are struggling to provide that connectivity, and what are some of maybe the common factors between countries and regions that struggle to provide ready and kind of able internet access?
Yes. No, thank you so much. I think one of the major learnings from this crisis is that this digital divide, I mean, we all know that it exists, and we all know that we need to find a way to bridge it. But I think what the pandemic highlighted like no other time before is, if you don't have the tools to connect to this new normal, then there is the risk of deeper inequalities between countries and within countries. So if we want to talk about the global digital divide, I mean, today there are 3.5 billion people in the world who do not have access to broadband connectivity. And, the world as a big village, in a way, we reached a very important milestone last year with 50% of people connected to the broadband. It takes 50 years for the world to reach that milestone. So a lot to celebrate, but also if we flip the coin and look at the other side, it means, we have so many people that are completely cut off from, what we're discussing now about digital having been, the hidden hero, or digital having been, an opportunity for business continuity and a lifeline for the economy in many cases. So 3.5 billion unconnected. A lot of the lack of connectivity is in low income countries. If we look at the case of Africa, for example, out of the 25 countries that are not connected to broadband, 21 are in Africa. Africa today, we're still at a single-digit connectivity rate when it comes to broadband, defined as 4G. So there is a lot of success on mobile communication in Africa, a lot of it. But when it comes to broadband, the ability to use, what we're using now to have this connection, unfortunately, many countries in the world still do not have it.
Yeah, I spent some time in rural parts of East Africa, and in some places just getting an email out to folks back home was really difficult, much less trying to make a video call like we're having today. But for the World Bank's Development Podcast, I recently spoke to two mothers in the Valle de Cauca region of Colombia, Carolina Jaramillo and Elena Rojas Rodriguez. They're two women, they're quite good friends. One works in an office, Carolina does. Elena is Carolina's housekeeper, but also really close friend. And they're living on two sides of that digital divide we're talking about this morning. And they told us on the podcast what it meant for their children's education, because in Colombia, like large parts of the world, the schools have been shut and many of the children have come home. We got that clip here, so we'll just play that clip so we can hear from these two mothers in Colombia.
Okay, I have two kids. One of them is 11, the other one is 14. Unfortunately, they're studying in private schools. So I think that the stress hasn't been so much as in public schools, because we have full internet. They have access to virtual classes through Zoom or Hangout or WebEx, I think it's called. And so the different platforms, and Skype as well. So they have been receiving their classes by this different platforms, and they have homeworks to do after class, which has been, quite easy for them in terms of it hasn't been difficult because, as I said before, I have all the internet connections.
And Elena, how are your kids continuing their education while they're not able to physically attend school?
Por el momento se encuentra.
Basically, that there's no internet connections, and whenever there is internet connection, it's very bad. In order to study, they're sending some homeworks via Facebook, but as I said before, the internet connection is really bad. And the other way is that they're sending photocopies to the school, and they have to pick it up, but it's far away from where they live, so sometimes it's difficult for them to pick it up. And that's basically how they're managing right now their virtual classes.
Well, Bettina, that was Carolina and Elena's story of trying to educate their kids while living on opposite sides of that digital divide we've been talking about for the past few minutes. As schools have locked down, is that a pattern you're seeing elsewhere where the digital divide is really sort of creating sort of haves and have-nots in other aspects of their lives?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And we see, different dimension of this digital divide within countries, even in advanced countries, like, for example, in the US with very good connectivity rate, there is a big issue between urban and rural, and there is a thinking to make sure that there are solutions for rural connectivities to make sure no one is left behind. The other dimension about the digital divide that is very important to highlight is the gender digital divide. So we know today that 300 million women, fewer women than men, have access to a broadband mobile connectivity. And we know that 33% less women than men know what to do with it. So it's a big issue. And, linked to COVID-19, it's really a pandemic that is not gender neutral. So as we think about the digital divide, we think about the rural-urban divide. We need to think about the gender divide. We need to think about, those who have the skills to use the opportunities that the technology offer and those who don't.
Adding sort of factors here that makes it much more complicated than just a simple digital divide. Yes. Here, I think is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely. It's like an onion. Every time you rip one part, there is another part that shows up. And it's really complicated.
One of the other things I wanted to ask about is we received a question on the World Bank's Facebook page from Gopal Agarwal. He's in India. Like I said, he was commenting on the World Bank's Facebook page, and he was asking about some of the particular challenges that people who are disabled or illiterate, and you were sort of hinting at that there, talking about skills. Can you talk a little bit about that? Some of the challenges that people who are either have disabilities or who may be illiterate, what does the digital divide mean for them?
Yes, it means that, governments and private sector operators need to think about solutions within the technology space, and there are many out there that, caters to the needs of, the disabled people. If you cannot read, then there is an opportunity for you to know what's out there on the internet, but, through different means. So far, what we see, a lot of good pilots. AI and having somebody who talks your language is very important. You don't need to read it to be, taking advantage of the promises of technology. It requires solutions, and it requires scaling up these solutions beyond the pilot phases. But definitely the digital divide has also a very important dimension about disability that needs to be taken into account.
Let's just take another quick moment here, Bettina. We'll sort of catch our breath and welcome everyone who is joining us here on World Bank Live. We've got Bettina Ghormazi. She's the World Bank's Director for Digital Development on the line. She's talking us through how the digital divide is really making the response to COVID-19 and the plans and the preparation for the recovery from COVID-19 that much more complicated. The digital divide being the difference between people who have ready and quality access to broadband internet technologies and those who don't. We see people joining from across the world this webcast. Banti from the Ivory Coast, Mohammed in Sudan, Amore in Indonesia, Adriana in Colombia, Patrick in Lebanon. Welcome to you all. Welcome to everyone else who's out there. We really appreciate you being with us this morning. Bettina, I want to come back to you now, and just as we start to wind this program down, let's talk a little bit about some of the solutions to the problems we've been talking about this morning. What can be done? What is the World Bank Group doing to try and bridge the digital divide that we've seen both during this crisis, but also before that we even had COVID-19 on our minds?
Yes. So first, it starts by understanding where are the problems and understanding the causes of these problems. And, some of it is linked to the fact that the investment pattern for broadband connectivity is very different from voice. It requires patient capital. It requires looking very closely at, policy and regulatory environment. And it also looks at, the skills that are needed to improve connectivity. So it starts by getting deeper into understanding the topic. And for us, I think connectivity is very important, but it is only important if it's, meaningful connectivity. And this, I'm giving a shout to the ITU on this particular concept that is very, very important. So we need to have connectivity, but we need to know what to use it for, and it needs to be meaningful. Understanding the needs, understanding what needs to be financed. We did a very good exercise under the Broadband Commission that looked specifically at Africa. And we know today that we need to invest $100 billion to bring 90% of Africa to a broadband connectivity of at least 4G. And we know this, for it to happen, we need very close collaboration with private sector, with partners. And I think COVID-19 also highlighted very, very clearly the importance of a collaborative approach.
And one important but maybe not as obvious factor, and I was reading a little bit about this before this program, but help us understand it a little bit, is in terms of broadening that access. It requires that capital, it requires that investment. But another important aspect is proof of identification. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that, why identification is important and how it's being improved around the world?
Yes. So, in a digital world, having a digital ID is very important. As a big part of our life is moving to the online world. Being recognized with a digital ID is very, very important. Today, 1 billion people do not have ID. So they are invisible. And, a big part of it is still in Africa and many other parts of the world. So having an ID that is recognized, that is digital, is very important to also take advantage of the services. For example, earlier I mentioned the cash transfer. How do we make sure that it gets to the right people? So, the ID dimension is very important. The whole digital discussion, Paul, don't get me wrong, the whole digital discussion is really a discussion beyond, the pipes that are needed. It's really a whole ecosystem approach, a mindset that we need to have to think about using technology for development. And it starts with the infrastructure. It also needs the skills. It needs the ID. It needs the platform. It needs this vision of the importance for digital as an equalizer. And if we don't have it, then digital can become a source for deeper inequality. And I'm very happy that in the bank, we're really thinking along those lines. And we're working with many partners to have this, ecosystem approach for digital connectivity.
And so it's bigger than just laying those, as you say, the pipes, the wires to connect people to the internet. To develop digitally, it's a holistic approach that requires a lot of different aspects. Just as we wrap up here, one last question for you. The World Bank believes digital development will be a key part of ensuring a resilient recovery from the pandemic that we're going through right now. Anyone who saw David Malpass on this program last month, he made the case for that, and we saw the clip at the top of this program. Do you think that the pandemic we're living in right now is an opportunity to strengthen connectivity around the world? Is it sort of underlying the need to strengthen that connectivity?
Yes, definitely. I think one of the silver linings for, the difficult times that we're going through is that it really brought to the fore the importance of being connected to cope with this world. It also brought the importance of handling the risks. We mentioned the risks of exclusion, but also the risk linked to cybersecurity or not having very robust system for, privacy and data as we move to a digital economy. So it is an opportunity. I mean, people say, let's not waste a crisis to get things right in a way. I think it really brought the importance of, thinking big, reimagining all these sectors that can, rebuild better with digital as an element in how we think about it and, reset. So very much an opportunity, and the time is now, and it requires doing things not the usual way. It requires thinking outside of the box.
Well, Bethina, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Bethina Ghoramazi is the World Bank's Director for Digital Development. She joined us from her home in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Before we go, a quick programming note for those who tune in here on World Bank Live. Later this month, we'll start looking in earnest at the challenges and opportunities that the pandemic recovery presents. We're looking at the big topics with some of the brightest minds from around the bank and the international development community. And we're kicking that off, like I said, later this month with a special program on food security. You can find the details in the coming days at live.worldbank.org. A huge thanks to everyone who joined us today. Let us know what you thought. Leave us a comment or message us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your feedback helps us improve these programs and make each one better and better. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about the World Bank and its work in responding to the COVID-19 crisis, head on over to worldbank.org/coronavirus. You can also listen to the complete interview with the Colombian mothers we featured in this program. Just search for the World Bank's Development Podcast on Spotify, Apple, or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. Until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you back here again soon. Goodbye.